Sorry to be okay. Um, Hello and welcome all of you to the Wiki Women User Group Capacity Building Workshop, which is the first of its kind. I know most of you probably have heard about Wiki Women User Group or might not have heard of Wiki Women User Group, but Wiki Women User Group is basically a space for women and women allies in the Wikimedia movement. And there are two main objectives for us being here. One of the objectives is providing a space for women who are engaged in the Wikimedia to collaborate on projects, discuss issues, and socialize with each other. And also another objective why we're here is to support uh, improving coordination between people who are working on women supporting or countering gender gap efforts in the Wikimedia movement all around the world. So basically, please can we mute? Lucy, can you help us fix that? Thank you. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. So basically, these are our main objective. And my name is Ruby from Ghana. I am one of the Wiki Women User Group coordinators. I'm here with my colleague who is Jemima, and I'll let her introduce herself as well. And we're also privileged to have one of the co-founders for the Wiki Women User Group, which is Rosie. I know Rosie's here. We can give a wave. I would like Rosie to say one or two things. I don't know if any of you know her, but Rosie, I would like you to say one or two things before we start.
Yeah. Thank you for that really nice introduction, Ruby. So as Ruby said, I'm Rosie Stevenson Goodnight. I am one of the 4 co-founders of Wiki Women User Group. It was founded in July 2015 at Wikimania, Mexico City. And till this day, the last 9 years, we've never done anything like we're going to do today. So we're so glad that you're here for our inaugural event. Ruby and Jemima, take it away.
Thank you. And I don't know if Jemima, you'd like to say something before Lucy comes on board, but Jemima is also one of the coordinators for the Wiki Women User Group, so you can always reach out to her. Yeah, so let's just zoom in to Lucy. I know most of you might have heard Lucy. She's done a lot of work around women's biography. I'll allow her to do more introduction about herself, but she's doing amazing work. She wrote about every woman from every country, which is an amazing feat. Writing on English Wikipedia is not a joke. Honestly, it's not a joke. So for her to have done this, it's really very inspiring, especially for us women who are looking up to people like her to learn. So without much ado, I'd like to invite Lucy, who is going to show us what are the tips and tricks. How does she do this? Why are we struggling? Why is she making that great feats? We want to learn, we want to also improve, and we also want to contribute to biographies on women on Wikipedia to help bridge the content gap. Yeah, the floor is yours, Ruth.
Oh, thanks so much, Ruby. That's so I'm blushing here in England. Just to say how wonderful it is to see so many people here and so many people I admire in the Zoom room as well. So I've got a kind of a slide deck that I'm going to talk through, which is a mixture of things I wish I'd known when I was starting to edit, or advice that I've kind of been given. And I've got examples of different Wikipedia articles that we'll kind of look at together as we go through. I'm going to assume that most people have edited English Wikipedia in the past. You might be more expert editors than me, but hopefully there'll be something for everyone to learn from here. And yeah, and I'm going to go through a few different aspects of it.
I think you're muted, Lucy. Sorry, I think you
Oh no, I thought I'd unmuted. Did you hear anything that I was saying?
I think just a few seconds.
Oh, okay, that's just my finger slipped. So I've only ever edited on English Wikipedia. So that's the context that I'm coming from. And I know that there are a lot of differences between different language Wikipedias. So perhaps at the end of the slide deck, I would be really interested to hear more about your experiences in the other languages you work in. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the participants coming in as well. So if I start looking from side to side, it's because I'm admitting more people, which is very exciting. But first, let me share my screen. 2 seconds. I don't know if you're like me, but I always have 1 million tabs open, which is not necessarily the best way to do things. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen, actually, but just before we get started, my presentation is on Commons as well. So if you want to like download and have a look at it as we're going through, you're very welcome to. There are quite a lot of links in it, so just that is why it might be particularly useful as well. So let's get going. Rosie and Ruby asked me to come and talk about fundamentals for editing women's biographies on Wikipedia. Although I've done a lot of writing, I've aggregated this experience over the last 5 years, and I tend to just write biographies. So I feel it's actually quite a sort of narrow frame of experience that I've got within the wider Wikimedia movement. But as Ruby very kindly said, I have managed to get an article for every country in the world and most territories through and published on English Wikipedia. So we can all be secure in the knowledge that there is at least one woman represented from pretty much every place, which I know there's loads of other people in the room who are adding to rapidly. So just for people who haven't met me before, we're going to go through a little bit of background about me and why I edit, how I got started. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about notability, sources, what I do to build an article, what happens when you think it's ready to publish. I'm going to talk a little bit about articles for deletion on English Wikipedia. And then I'm going to talk about some other ways that you can enhance women's presence on English Wikipedia too. So why did I learn to edit? So I learned to edit in 2019, and at that time I was motivated by gaps that I saw in content about male soldiers from the First World War. So I had no idea about the gender gap. I had no idea about the issues with gender-related content on Wikipedia, but I had been working as a historian of the First World War, and there were lots of things that were missing to do with men who were soldiers. I didn't quite know how to get started. Like I looked and I thought, oh, this looks a bit, I'm not sure how to get going. So I went to a workshop run in the city that I live in by an organisation called West Yorkshire Queer Stories. And that was an LGBTQ history project. And I said to them, oh, I'm not really intending to edit about LGBT history. Is it still okay if I come along? And they very kindly said, yes, of course, come and learn. And we had a 2-hour session, and the guys who ran it gave a talk. And as part of the talk, they talked about how varied and limited queer content on Wikipedia can be. And then also extrapolating from that, how limited the content about women was. And to be honest, that made me do a bit of a U-turn because I thought, oh, if this is something I'm going to do in my spare time, because I like sharing knowledge and making things available, there's probably more work that I can do around women than I need to do around male soldiers. So if it wasn't for this small workshop, and I should say there were only 2 of us at that workshop, there were 2 guys who were running the training and there were 2 attendees. So I say that, I always use that as an example of if you don't get many people coming to an event you're running, that doesn't really matter, because sometimes, you know, one of those people might go on to have like a big impact. And I'm very fortunate that because of editing, I've been able to create lots of content and also talk to a lot of other people about why it's important that we should respect Wikipedia. But so I learned to edit, I had the basics, but I didn't quite know how to like get over the edge of like making my first article and how to like that tipping point of getting involved. I was lucky to be informally mentored by someone from Wikimedia UK, Richard Neville, who I think had spotted on Twitter, or X as it is now, when I was saying, oh, I want to edit, but there's this problem and I don't get it. And he was just like, I'll give you a hand. And then once I'd had a little bit of coaching from him, which was very kind, I then found Wiki Project Women in Red, and that has been like the main community that I've been involved in on Wikipedia. And I've said it to the community on our talk page, and I've said it in publicly to many people, but without the support of the Women in Red community and the other people I've now met around the movement, I would have not been continuing to edit. I wouldn't have had the encouragement. I wouldn't have had people sharing their wisdom with me. I wouldn't have had the network of people that you sometimes need to support you when you've missed something with an article, or just to find sources that your internet browser isn't bringing up. Or But if you take anything away from this, it's find a community of like-minded editors with a mixture of experience, and ask them for help. I'm always asking for help still on our talk page, but I think that's a good thing because we're always growing and we're always learning. And fundamentally, and I think this is especially true for Wikimedians, we like to help. Like, we wouldn't be creating this content and sharing this information if we didn't want to help. So find your community, wherever that might be in Wikimedia. So, and this is my first edit, which is still here. So my first ever edit on something like the 28th of February 2019 was this sentence here that goes, in January 2019, Leeds-based brewery Anthology created a new beer to celebrate LGBT History Month. And it's still there on the LGBT Culture in Leeds page. I now know there shouldn't really be a hyperlink in the text, and I might go back and shift that for formatting. And it just goes to show that we all start somewhere, and you can start very small and things can expand and multiply. So thinking about editing, so I really welcome people to share, you know, how they get started or how they find topics. I've sort of entitled this session, So You've Got Somebody in Mind. So you've come across a woman or a gender diverse person who you think they should be included in the encyclopedia. I often find people from lists that the Women in Red project runs. So we have hundreds of lists of potential gaps in Wikipedia. And because I often edit with a geographical focus in mind, I often go to our lists of countries and go, oh, do I want to edit about someone from Nigeria today? Maybe I do. But it might be that you've seen someone in the news, you've read about someone in a book, you've seen someone like just doing lots of like activism online, and you think, oh, they I'm just admitting a couple of people, sorry. They might be you know, worthy of inclusion. So hopefully this will sort of catch all for all these different ways that we find people to write about. So the first question is, are they notable enough for Wikipedia? And I think it's really easy to forget that notability varies across professions, and there's a range of different criteria according to different careers, different paths. And these are just some basic points to think about. So, we've had a lot of sporting events lately, and I think, the kind of the criteria at the moment is that have they won an international medal, which I think is possibly quite a high bar for international sports people, but there we go. And this was something I was commenting on this morning. So, like for academia, has an academic, how important are they in their field? And one of the ways that that's recognised is by having a Festschrift published, which is when people who aren't you dedicate an entire book to a celebration of your research. And that's, a really good marker of inclusion for an academic. Have people been awarded prizes, whether that's prizes for music, prizes for science. That's just another way of demonstrating that someone's notable enough for inclusion. If they're a professional, do they feature in a National Dictionary of Biography? That's another thing that you can kind of use, particularly if you're just sort of thinking about bridging that. I can edit inline, but I want to start creating some articles. Find, someone that you want to write about, but is definitely notable. I think some of the people I first started editing about were probably a bit borderline, and that just makes your task just much harder, because you're trying to, learn how to edit, but also learn how to put the case forward for people well in your writing. But there is a link in the slide deck to the notability guidance, which goes on for tons of pages and is really detailed. So you should be able to find something that will fit the person that you've got in mind there. I'm not going to go into every different subcategory of notability though, but I'm sure between us all in the room, if at the end people have got like some questions about it, I'm sure we can all answer them. So are they notable enough? First question. So here's one of the examples that I was going to talk about. So just bear with me. Oops. Sorry, I'm just going to get the link and put it in the chat. Yeah, great. Thanks for the patience. Okay, so I've never heard Ngaliforu's name said aloud, so I've said it to the best of my abilities. I'd love to be better informed afterwards. But so she's a queen from what was now the Republic of Congo, and I started an article about her in 2021. So how do we demonstrate that she's notable? So we demonstrate that she was notable. So you can see from kind of the beginning of the page that she was a ruler, she was known, she had a high position within this society, and that might, just knowing that might be enough. But you need to support that and demonstrate that she's notable. So if we go down to the bottom of the article, so how does she meet notability? So for now I'm thinking about it, I'm struggling with the name, sorry. So now for Ngaliforu, you can see that she got the Legion of Honor from the French government. She got a medal from the French government. You can also see that she was the subject of a poem by a famous, I think, Congolese writer. Someone wrote a biography about her. And she's also in the Dictionary of African Biography. So these are a number of different ways, the Dictionary of African Biography by itself makes her notable enough, but the combination of these other ways that her legacy was recognised, as well as the other medals, of course, shows that she does meet notability criteria. So it's those kind of things that you're looking at. You're never looking for, I say I'm great. You're looking for a range of other people to recognise the contributions that somebody has made. And I've definitely found editing for women about the world that, you know, there are definitely places and continents where women are much less written about. So it's really important if you have, we're always thinking about how we can edit Wikipedia, but I think it's also important that we try to leverage, you know, how can we get journalists to write about these people? Can we suggest to historians to, to write about these people? Can we influence some of this discourse to change slightly? I sometimes review books as part of my career, and I try to only review books by women. Just because there are fewer books reviewed by women in general. And because book reviews in themselves can be a really useful way of demonstrating that a book that someone's written helps to meet notability criteria. But that is a slight movement to one side. Ngala Faru received medals. She was written about. UNESCO praised her. She had a biography, and she's in the Dictionary of Biography. Definitely meets notability guidelines. So then, when you've got your person in mind, and you know that they're notable, you need to make sure that you've got enough sources that will demonstrate this to other people. It's really tempting, and we all do have different styles, but it's really tempting to just kind of like start writing. But I really think it's worth the time to find enough sources that you're pretty certain, if they were kind of held up to scrutiny, would demonstrate the notability that you can see. I think you need a minimum of 3, but I wouldn't say you just need 3. The more sources you can provide, the better. But you do need to have 3 kind of core sources that are reliable, independent, so independent of the subject, so not written by them or their relatives, and trustworthy. And I always try and find them first, whether that's putting them in a million tabs on my browser, or I'll put them in a range of places. Places to look. So obviously we'll all do a web search with whichever search engine that we're using. Different search engines bring up different sources sometimes, so it's always worth not just relying on the one that you use habitually. I also always look at Google Books and Google Scholar, and also to different news outlets. So for example, the BBC, an article about someone on the BBC, that's usually a good sign that the good source to support notability of a person. Academic articles as well, although of course, you know, they can often be behind a paywall, but that's where I would suggest your wider community, now that you're finding and chatting to them on talk pages, might be able to be helpful, as well as once you've done, I think it's 500 edits, the Wikipedia library can also be really useful as well. It sounds perhaps a bit obvious, but check on Wikipedia. You know, quite often you'll find references about different women buried in other articles. So do a search on Wikipedia, and quite often I'll find 2 or 3 useful sources that are kind of already embedded in other pages and articles, and that makes some of the kind of later work that you do a bit easier. And also go beyond page 1 of the search engine. I always joke that sometimes I have to go really deep into Google to like find things, and these might be old articles, or they might be articles that are I don't know, that feature the person prominently, but they're not necessarily like about the person in the headline. So it sometimes is an exercise in patience, and and also time. You know, I'm lucky for many reasons. I do have some time to devote to editing, but it's not the time requirement is definitely one that can be quite intensive. So essentially, don't feel bad if it takes you ages to find your sources, because it is hard. So we'll look at another example now. So I'll just flip back and get the link. Get rid of that one. Okay, and then chat. Great. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Great. So this is another person who I wrote about actually in 2020, so I hadn't been editing that long. And this is for Intibagang Ratshosa, who was another woman leader in what is today Botswana. And her life is like really fascinating. Like I'd really encourage you to read about her. But what I wanted to show you was going back to this point about sources, and I apologize for like the arrows and the circles. I couldn't really think of a clearer way to show it. So the reason that I'm highlighting these different sources are that if you Google her, kind of apart from the Wikipedia article that there is now, there's not a huge amount, or certainly when I wrote this in 2020, there wasn't a huge amount that was immediately obvious about her. But when you start to do this aggregation of different sources, you know, you can see from here with the sort of aqua circles, she's in two different historical dictionaries of the Historical Dictionary of Botswana and the Historical Dictionary of Women from Sub-Saharan Africa. So those are two, you know, really good sources that demonstrate notability. She's also features in 3 different academic articles, and academic articles are a really good way of demonstrating that because they're peer reviewed, well, mostly peer reviewed, they're a really good, like, trusted way of demonstrating her notability. However, and this is why this is quite interesting, the source that I could get the most actual kind of information about the nitty-gritty of her life was from the Weekend Post, which is like a weekly kind of news source from Botswana. And I don't think if I use that as a solo source, that would be deemed like reliable enough for Wikipedia. But because it's in combination with these other sources, it works quite well, and kind of they have established that she's notable and important enough for inclusion. And this is just providing a bit more detail about her life. So sometimes you have to think about how you're going to sort of mesh these different sources together, because one that gives you a lot of detail might not actually meet the sort of requirements for sources that Wikipedia has. Great. Just going to skip forward. Sorry. So apologies for the sudden appearance of this slide. I think when you're thinking about notability, it's really, for some cases, particularly when it's something to do with the death of somebody, how you talk about them on Wikipedia is really important. So Noor Al-Safar was a social media influencer who was shot earlier in the year in Baghdad. And it's just a really kind of sad case. But Noor at the time, they weren't, as an influencer, they weren't notable enough to be for an article about them to be about their work as an influencer, because it hadn't got that reach. And really, they were in the press mostly as a result of their murder. And I think it's quite important. I think their presence in Wikipedia is important, but I think you also have to be quite upfront that it's their death that is the reason that they're included. So it's not necessarily always straightforward when it's a biographical article, because sometimes, particularly when you want to include people, because we all know that people who are from marginalized communities are more likely, to be murdered in this way. So there's just something about kind of sensitivity there that I think is important for us to recognize, and that you might want to write a biography about them, but actually, in certain cases, an article about their death and the context of their life within that is sometimes a bit more appropriate for the notability criteria. I don't necessarily say that is morally or ethically appropriate, but for notability criteria, that's one way of working within the guidelines that we have as a community. So moving on, and that's, I think, kind of the most sort of serious slide from the set. But here are just some tips for things that I do. So mostly I get loads of sources in my browser tab and then use them kind of one at a time when I'm editing. Some people put them in their sandbox just as a list, of a reminder. I know one person who, every time they're going to make an article, has a spreadsheet of their sources and ranks the sources. So like, this is definitely a really solid source. This is really like gold quality. This is, has detail, but it's probably not deemed that reliable. And there are some sources that are banned from Wikipedia, which we'll come on to as well. I quite like the spreadsheet idea. I don't have the patience myself for that, but other people might. A Word document is also useful. A thing that I do increasingly now, I'm getting more involved with projects beyond Wikipedia, is I set a Wikidata item up for a woman I'm thinking of writing about, and then I add references to the different pieces of information that I add there. And that's quite a nice place where I can store things, but also other people can find it, and that woman is more connected to like our global, network of knowledge, which is a win in and of itself. For English Wikipedia, I think it's also important to remember that your sources don't have to be in English. So I've written articles about women on English Wikipedia where the sources have been entirely in other languages. I can think of one that's entirely in Arabic, at least one, but also, where all the sources have been in French or other places. You don't have to find English language sources for an English Wikipedia article. So if you're coming to this session and you normally work in another language Wikipedia, you can use, all the sources from your home language, and they're just as valid on English Wikipedia. I don't think that Google Translate is terrible, but you should try and use it probably for quite simple things. So I wouldn't necessarily use Google Translate to try and understand like the intricacies of like a historiographical or a philosophical discussion, but I would use it to be like, this person was born here, went to this university, and died here, for example. I think it's also really important to remember that articles don't have to be long. A really like nice, neat, short stub article with a range of really like great sources is really useful. It's something to be expanded, but also, it's got all the information in one place. I've heard people talk about the pressure to like have quite a long article, but often like brevity is really important. So don't think that your first few articles have to be that long. There is a translation tool on Wikipedia as well, but I've never used it. So hopefully there's other people who might be able to talk to that later on. Okay. So I found the perennial sources page only like, I don't know, 18 months ago, when I was thinking there must be somewhere on Wikipedia where you can check how reliable your sources are. And if you haven't come across it, let me put the link in the chat, in fact. Because I think this is actually the page that I use the most, other than like editing pages. So what I will say is that it doesn't cover everything. So you won't find every single kind of source listed here. But for major sources, it does have this like kind of traffic light system. So green is like good source, generally reliable. Red is no. Um, and with these convenient, stop signs as well. But I think the yellow is actually very useful because it says, that for this particular source, some is okay, but you need to treat it with caution. And I think that's really useful because then you can take your own judgment when you're looking at a source that you want to support. And it's also useful for if your article is nominated for deletion as well. And we're getting, quite deep, I think, now into editing. But on the perennial sources page, there's also a place where you can search and see if there's been previous community discussion about this source. And again, this is really useful for articles for deletion, but it's also really useful if you found, like a newspaper that's online and you think, I think it's okay. I wonder if other people in the past have thought it's okay. And you can search and it goes through all of the talk page archives and brings out if there's been any discussion. I tried it for the Weekend Post from Botswana and there had not been any discussion. So it's not something that's come up. And that in itself is, knowledge that you can use. So I know it's not, it's not being controversial, for example. So it can stay in Tabagang's article. So, and preservation. So this might be kind of obvious. It might be something that people do habitually. I try more and more and more to archive all the web sources I use with the Internet Archive. Particularly, and it's been really, really useful, particularly when I've been editing for about women from countries that have perhaps a like less stable sort of media. Making sure that you're archiving all the sources that you use as you go is really helpful for anyone who's going and looking at that article. You've done the archiving for them, but also for the wider health of the online world. Often for me, I'm writing about women who have been overlooked. That's why they're not on Wikipedia. So making sure that information about them is archived is really important. And you can have a browser extension from them and it's really easy to use, so highly recommend. And this is just going back to this point of, I don't think I've reviewed all my sources. I don't think I've got enough. I would definitely recommend setting up a Wikidata item. And I'm just going to briefly show you an example of where someone else set up a Wikidata item and then I ended up writing the biography. So I'll just put these two links in the chat. Bear with me. In fact, I'll just... So, the Wikidata item, which you should all be able to see and click the link through in the chat, for Adelaide K. Semesi. She, who's from Tanzania, she is a marine biologist and her Wikidata item had been set up ages ago by an editor called Ambrosia 10. And I was looking for someone to write about from Tanzania. And I like scientists, I like the sea. I was like, oh, she sounds great. And in the Wikidata item, if you're having a look, you'll see there's lots of like links to references. So I could then basically use most of the references that are in the Wikidata item to build the Wikipedia biography. which I did, and I told Ambrosia 10, and it was a very nice moment of someone else started it, and I've carried it forward. Because it's quite easy, I think, sometimes when you're editing Wikidata to be like, oh, will this be useful for people? And I can definitely say, yes, it is. I find it very useful. And now Adelaide Messi, she has this nice biography on Wikipedia, and her presence is much better known now, and it's now being translated into other languages as well, which I'm always like so thrilled when I see that something I've written has been translated by other people, because it just shows that someone else has just read it and then taken the time and thought, oh, actually people who read in the language that I'm translating this to, they would find this valuable as well. So I love it so much. So thank you. So thinking about your draft. So the article, help, your first article. I think most people will be experienced, but just because anyone is new, or maybe you've not done an article for a while and you'd like a refresher, the help your first article page within Wikipedia, it does a really kind of good walkthrough of like pretty much everything I've talked about now, like everything you need to kind of remember. It sets up a draft for you, and walks you through like the whole process. So I would really recommend using that. I have edited enough now that I don't use that, but I do normally set up a page in draft space rather than my sandbox. I can't really remember the last time I used my sandbox, to be honest. But that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't use it. I know lots of people love using their sandbox, but I live a slightly more dangerous life on the edge, I guess. So this is a draft that I just started earlier today for a Sudanese archaeologist called Galia Garil Nabi. And this is just to illustrate just a few of the points that I was talking about. So you can see perhaps along the top, I've got 8 different sources that I'm using in the article. One of them is from the Guardian newspaper, another's from the Africa Institute. Then there's like 4 different Arabic news sources. And you can see that I've highlighted one of the Arabic news sources, but I've just used the Google Translate in my browser to read. It's not a finished draft by any means. And then there's just a couple of things that I just when we're thinking about how we demonstrate notability through our writing, this sentence at the bottom, so she's in this Guardian article talking about archaeology in Sudan and how it's endangered because of the civil war. But she also talks about how there's more women on the university course than when she did it like 30 years ago. So just for readers, I'm saying, well, actually, she spoke to the Guardian newspaper about gender diversity. So that's kind of like building her reputation within the article. And I think sometimes just thinking quite carefully about how you phrase something and stating the name of the source that you're citing can be really helpful, according to, BBC News, according to CNN Europe, and that just kind of within the process says to the reader, oh, they're in this paper, they're in this, oh, that is important. And I don't think I did that very much when I was like starting out to edit, and I would encourage people to do that now. So, okay, so I'm just going to run through this section quickly, which is just some of the things that I think probably everyone here will know, will already do, but just a quick reminder because they're things that I often forget sometimes. So, categories. I am a devil for forgetting to add categories when I publish an article. Why do I always forget? So please, add categories to your pages. Otherwise, you'll get a message from someone very nice saying, Lucy, you haven't added any categories again. And if you're adding categories, you can there's the drop-down list if you use visual editor, years of birth and death, places, professions. There's a massive range of things, so I don't really have any excuse, to be honest. Embed your article into other pages, and like be bold about it. So these examples are all now for a British artist called Margaret Frobisher. So, and it's quite easy when you've like made the article to be like, oh, I'm done. This exhausting process that I had to think about so intently, you know, I'm finished. But probably for the amount of time you spent writing the article, you should spend an equal amount embedding links into other articles, because otherwise, how are people going to find out about this person? Particularly when, you know, lots of the women that we're writing about, you know, we're trying to make them better known because there's an issue around their representation. So you really need to invest that time in adding them into other articles, and it's really satisfying because you can suddenly be like I was editing the article about the Hajj, like the pilgrimage to Mecca, and I added something about a woman to that, and I thought, wow, this is like this is amazing. Like I get to like share knowledge in this space. This is extraordinary. So that can sometimes be, you know, like a real privilege that we're able to do, and we're able to expand this content in new directions. Just get my yeah. And this is just an example of how I expanded a bit of a page. So, you know, there are paintings from these two artists, Lucy Kemp Welch and Margaret Kemp Welch. And then I described Lucy Frobisher and Margaret Kemp Welch as her companion and protege. In not any reliable source, so only in unreliable sources, there's been like discussion as to whether they were a lesbian couple. There's nothing you could include on Wikipedia, but the but there are, you know, companion that is used in some of the sources, so you can use that in the article, so you can start to sort of introduce this idea of I've heard a curator called Margaret Middleton describe it as queer possibility. So you can sort of, you know, you're not saying anything outright, but you're introducing that potential if it's also reflected in the sources. Add templates to other projects, you know, signaling that this is here, you know, come and have a look at it. You can also start discussions. So biography, if you're writing about any person, you should add to Wikiproject biography, and so on and so on. You do often get people, I often get people from different projects coming along and sort of making edits, and I think, oh, I don't know that username from Women in Red, and it's because they've come through from another project that I've tagged here. So that's really nice, and again is another constructive part of the community that we have. Nominations for deletion. So this is something that that Rosie suggested we talk about a little bit today. So it happens to us all. Oh no, my article has been nominated for deletion. Oh, what do we do? It absolutely happens. Well, actually, I was about to say it absolutely happens more for women from global majority countries, but I don't actually know if that's true. I just imagine that it is. If it happens to you, don't panic. And now this is statistically supported. So biographies about women are more likely to be saved at articles for deletion than those of men. And there's been like a statistical study on that. So actually your odds of your article surviving for deletion are better than for most other types of content, which is really good. The first thing I do is I contact Women in Red, my family on Wikipedia, but you have to do it neutrally. So you can't post and say, "Oh my God, this has been so unfair," blah 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 blah. Even though that's how you might feel, and we all know that there are, you know, aggressions and microaggressions and macroaggressions to people from marginalized genders who edit on Wikipedia. We know that is true, but hopefully it's improving. But so you know, be neutral despite how you might feel internally, and just say, you know, this article I started with articles for deletion. And, you know, that's a hint that other people might want to go and look. And then it's also really important to go back and look at your article, and kind of try and look at it through the eyes of whoever's nominated it. You know, have you got is the lead really explicit about why this person is significant? Have you definitely followed I've got 3 really secure sources. I've got other sources that add detail, but I've got these, you know, 3, you know, academic papers, or 3, you know, articles about the profiles, I guess, from newspapers or so on. And, you know, just, you know, they got an award. Is the award, you know, is it in its own award section? Just things like that. And you can comment, you know, when an article is nominated for deletion as the person who wrote the article, but, you know, refer to the notability guidance that we mentioned at the start. So, you know, find the section that's most appropriate for your subject. And when you're making your comments, you refer to specific criteria, refer to, you know, other cases that you might have seen, because it's the quality of the argument, not the numbers of people voting, that is really key at articles for deletion. So there's an example here. So this is for someone called Teresa Areola. So she's from the Northern Mariana Islands, and is an activist for Indigenous rights, and is also a early career academic. So as an early career academic, she wouldn't be kind of notable by herself, for that by itself on Wikipedia, but because of her activism, and because that's quite widely written about, she is notable. But she was nominated for deletion. And I will just nip out of the presentation actually, and oops, and put the sorry, the bars come down. And put the link in the chat for people who might find it a bit easier. There you go. Okay, back we are. So this is the kind of there was a nomination for deletion, and I was quite new to like the processes, and I was like, oh, they passed basic. I think you can like integrate 7 of the professional, the academic guidance, but then as you can see, you know, further down, you know, it's actually other editors that came in and said, you know, well, we need to think intersectionally. You know, she's from a very small place in the Pacific. Of course, there's not going to be enormous amounts of coverage, but there is some coverage, and the coverage is over time. Are some of these from reliable sources? Yes, they are. So my case I put forward wasn't very good, but Susan W's was fantastic. And it was really her, as a member of like the wider community, that really kind of saved this article. So very grateful. And then obviously everyone else who came along and said, you know, there is merit in this, which is really kind and useful. Other things, this is just one of my favorite things for people to remember to use. Adding citation needed is just a really nice thing to do. Well, I think it's a nice thing in that you're saying to the reader, you know, don't take this as face value. There's not a reference here. And I think that's really, really useful, and something we mustn't forget in this kind of period of, you know, I guess, are we media illiteracy, I guess, you know, in some ways. So I would just encourage people to not be afraid to just drop a little, we could do with a reference here in. And finally, last few minutes before we've got time for questions, I would also just always encourage people to have their own like personal projects. I'm sure people do, but it's totally, that will keep you, engaged. It will keep you entertained sometimes. It gives you a reason to edit, and it can be anything. It can be, like as broad as like women writers, or it can be like as narrow as like women who've won a specific award, and anything in between. So this is a picture of me doing a presentation about smell, and at Wikimania, which I'll come on to, but I quite think I'm doing my best like jazz hands to the audience at the moment. Ruby mentioned it at the beginning. So projects that I noticed I was already doing but hadn't formalized it was writing about a woman from every country in the world. And I've done that. I've always been interested in geography, so I was writing about women from different countries, and I'd done, I don't know, maybe a quarter of them, and I thought, hang on, this is becoming a thing. So I made a list, and then I worked through the list. And if you're the kind of person who likes to work through lists, it was really, really satisfying. And I think one of the things that we are all doing all the time as editors and activists within the Wikimedia movement is we're always doing extraordinary things. But I think we also struggle with having confidence about saying this is an extraordinary thing. When I finished this challenge that I set myself, I also then set myself the subsequent challenge to see if I could get any of the press interested in it. Because I thought, I mean, I know there's probably some other people who've done this, and I expect some of them are in this room. But there wasn't anything kind of like written widely about people doing it. So I approached a newspaper in the UK, The Guardian, actually. They wrote an article about it, and then that got picked up by other news agencies. And I really had to give myself like a really strong talking to beforehand, because I shrank down. I was like, oh, it's just making Wikipedia articles. Like, will anyone be interested? It's just my hobby. And, we are all, aggregating knowledge all the time, and it's really profound and powerful. And I think the more we can do when we have something discrete, like a project like this, that can then be used to tell a story to other people around the world, then we should try and do that as much as we can. I would say it's scary, but it's worth doing. And in terms of like how you find a press person, I found it much the only responses I got were when I approached journalists as individuals, rather than approaching any kind of news agencies. Sorry, I'm just muting somebody. Okay, sorry about that. So approaching journalists as individuals. Okay. Yes. So I also integrate Wikipedia editing into my PhD research. So my PhD is on early medieval coinage in Britain. So I've written about the woman whose work I'm basing my PhD on, but also various hoards. So, if you have a profession, and this is not like, I don't think this class is as paid editing. This is just something I have an interest in. I'm not citing my own work in any of these things. I'm kind of making Wikipedia work for me. I don't have a very good memory for dates. So if I make a Wikipedia article about this hoard, and put the specific dates in, I'll remember it. It's all been published already. So it's just helpful for me and for other people. I also went through a phase a couple of years ago now, where I noticed that there was quite poor coverage for like small Pacific Island countries' museums, and that there weren't articles for places like the Solomon Islands National Museum. And so I work in museums and heritage, and I was kind of I was really frustrated by lots of British curators sort of going, oh well, we'd love to repatriate, but where would things go? And in my head, when I was listening to all these people talking, I thought, well, you look for the Wikipedia article for the relevant National Museum. And then I realized they weren't there, that it was just overlooked. So I wrote a number of different articles about Pacific museums to basically enrage, out of rage that people couldn't be bothered to find out about these places. So rage can also be a powerful motivator, but don't let it colour the phrasing that you use in your writing, be what I would say. I'm also really interested in how other projects can be used to illustrate more feminist issues. I've got really into adding images of sanitary bins to Wikimedia Commons because there were 2 a year ago. And in contrast, there were images of over 200 condom machines. And I think that's a bit inequitable. So I've been adding, I've either been finding pictures of sanitary bins on Wikimedia Commons already, or I've been adding them as I've been on my travels, but I can't visit every country in the world. So please add pictures of sanitary bins from where you're living. Because I just think it's really important that there are examples of this, of menstrual hygiene practice from all around the world, readily available and accessible. I'm very passionate about it. I don't think we need quite 200 pictures of condom machines, however. And then I'm also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested in smell and how we can describe that using Wikidata. So the property smells of now, which there didn't used to be. And again, this is just me thinking about, how can the Wikimedia movement, really start to think about how we can describe the world and, link all the different places and spaces that there are knowledge together for different ways of thinking about our environment. So the example here is there is a small fish called a smelt, and the smelt smells of cucumbers, weirdly. But I just think that's the kind of thing that we need to be recording, whether that's from like a biodiversity point of view, or probably more like me from like I like trivia point of view. So I hope that has given you things to think about. I just wanted to end on how editing has impacted on me. So I would definitely say learning to edit Wikipedia has been transformative. So it affects how I think about knowledge production and this term knowledge hoarding that I keep using with my academic colleagues. Are you hoarding that? You're hoarding that paper. Make it open. It's also made me more political. It's definitely influenced my own activism and how I see myself as a citizen within my local community, but also within kind of the wider country that I live in. It's had impacts on my work. I've learnt a lot. I've met incredible people. I've also found it really supportive for my mental health. And I don't think I'm alone in that. When I'm really stressed out, now I've learned to edit. One of the most relaxing things I do is of an evening, I'll write a Wikipedia article about a woman, and I just find it a very soothing activity now. And I've also met a whole range of incredible people from all around the world, both in the online spaces and in person. And I think it just overall is just making me a better human. And I'm really grateful to have that opportunity to improve myself. So thank you very much. Say hi on my talk page. And I'm going to stop screen sharing, and hopefully we can have a nice little discussion in the last few minutes.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for this insightful presentation. We've learned so much. Myself, I've learned so much I didn't know. And some of the things that really was striking to me was that there's actually a tool where we can even verify our sources and all of that. I think there's a question. Yeah, it's time for questions. Nano has a question, so I'll invite Nano to the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Lucy, and the group for organizing this and presenting this session. It kind of refreshing and knowing another methods. How can we to implement and to make the new or beginners to involve and articles. Actually, it's more than a note or something to mention or to point to it that the examples here is on the English Wikipedia, which is the most developed English Wikipedia in the other linguistics version of Wikipedia. So and the notability is not the same on all the Wikipedia. This is very important because this is something that I faced recently with some organizer actually, that the article that in this version or linguistics version is not it's not should be in another one because it's not the notability criteria over, or we have the same five pillar, but we don't have the same notability. So please, before going and create your article for the notability, go and read the politic notability on your own language. And the second is the perennial sources. If you can explain a little bit more the mechanism to have this list of the source, because this as well we don't have it on all the Wikipedia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nano, for pointing out that useful information. Does anyone have any question? You can leave it in the chat. You can also, you can also share if you want. We still have some few minutes. We are already at time. It's actually 4:07, but we can give some 1 or 2 minutes if anyone has any question. Yeah. I don't know if Rosie wants to add to what has just been shared, but I think this is one of the amazing presentation. I'm actually going to dig deep into that presentation because there's so many useful links that I never knew actually existed that can help me. And so I would encourage all of you to access the link to Lucy's presentation, which has been shared in the chat. I can share it again if you don't have access to it, and you can dig deep into it. I'm also joined here by my co-coordinator, Jemima. I don't know if Jemima wants to say something, but we are actually the Wiki Women User Group coordinators for this period. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Ruby.
Yeah. Jemima, would you want to say something?
Yeah, a little. I just want to, in fact, I am so glad. I'm so happy. Thank you so much, Ruby. Hi, everyone. I'm Jemima Entry, working together as a coordinator with Ruby. And just as Ruby said, I want to say a big thank you to Lucy. Sorry, thank you so much for your expertise. In fact, I have really learned a lot. Thank you so much for your expertise, your guidance and dedication. You have made this workshop not only insightful, but truly inspiring. And thanks to participants who joined us and organizers, Woozy, Ruby, myself, Vita. And as Ruby earlier mentioned, we aim to empower participants with the skills and knowledge to bridge the gender gap on Wikipedia by improving the representation of women's stories and achievements. I know women's contribution have often been underrepresented, and through this workshop, we hope to inspire and equip you to research, write, and edit. Together, we are not just building capacity, but we are shaping history and ensuring that everything works well. So, Lucy, thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. Thank you. Yeah, Ruby, please, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jemima. I think there's a hand. Someone wanted to ask a question before. I'm getting the Telegram page. So actually, this is going to be a bi-weekly training. Sorry, bi-monthly training. So expect the next training in January. We are bringing in great resource persons to share more knowledge with us. So January, we're gonna announce the next training. I thought someone had a question. Glad to see several of my colleagues from Wikipedia, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Did anyone want to say something? Just go ahead, just unmute. Without that, I would ask Rosie to say something.
I put a note. Hi, it's Rosie. I put a note in the chat. The question I had was, will a link to the recording be added to the event page?
Frustrated.
And also a link to Lucy's presentation that's on Wikimedia Commons, so that people who weren't able to attend today would still have benefit of the information.
Thank you, Rosie, for that. I think someone also is asking, okay, so Lucy's presentation. Someone also asked, how can they join the Telegram group? Is there a link or what's the process? Let me see. Okay, I'm sharing the link to the presentation. So you can find Lucy's presentation here. Yeah. Okay, so I think I'll just bring the session to an end if there are no questions. I don't see any hand. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we share the recording as well with you all. And also we'll try to upload it on Commons if it's not so long, or on our YouTube channel. Yeah, so please do well to follow us at Wiki Women User Group on Instagram and LinkedIn. These are the two platforms that we are in. So please go to Instagram, LinkedIn, and just follow us. The session has come to an end. Let's take a group picture if you're okay with that for our diff post. Yay. Okay, so we're gonna do a diff post, and you all are inaugural members of the Wiki Women User Group Workshop. And wow, it's good to see faces. It's so encouraging to see the real human beings behind all of these content that we see. It's so refreshing. It makes you feel like you're not alone. Yes, definitely. Because sometimes it can feel so lonely, but yeah, we're really great. Yeah. Thank you. I think I have a picture of everyone. Good. So please look forward to the link in the course of the week, and also our festive post that will launch out from this program, highlighting the key takeaways and all the important links that you need to have. Yeah. So all the best, and yeah, enjoy. Do you have a wonderful evening?
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for
Goodbye,
coming.
and thank
It's
you
wonderful
very
to see
much.
Good
you.
to see you,
Bye-bye.
Janice, Andy, Blessing, Christopher.
Thank you so
Wow,
much.
amazing.
Bye-bye.
Rosie,
Bye.
Lucy, Sarah, Kate, Jemima. Oh my God, this is amazing. Yautuba, Pamela, Julie, Sandra. Good. Margaret,
Bye.
Sarah. Bye. Blessing, Nancy. Oh, gotcha. Bye.
Hello,
Okay.
everyone.
Hi,
Hello,
Pamela.
people.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm not sure I can hear you.
Sorry about the company. I company.
Okay, sure. Hello. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, they will know how to understand.